Hey, Roob.
Hey, Dave.
How's it going?
It's going well. Big day tomorrow.
Yeah, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, which means that in a little over 24 hours, the NFL releases the schedule in prime time because that's what the NFL does.
Everything's in prime time, and then we can start going win loss win loss, and figure out exactly what's going to happen during the season. It just struck me like what other things can the NFL start like making into a big event that they haven't yet, like practice squad day.
I mean, I think joint practices are the next big thing.
Yeah.
I think they're going to start like televising them at some point.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And as there are fewer and fewer preseason games, and I'm guessing there'll only be two next year. I think there's still three. Guessing two next year. Might even be 18 games next year. I think the joint practices will be even more and more prevalent. Not everyone does them, but I think there's two preseason games. I think almost everyone's going to do joint practices.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the NFL is a monster, and we feed into a little bit. This is the Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan, Reuben Frank, and Dave Zangaro. It is amazing, though, that the schedule release is now like it's a big deal. There's content built around it. We're going to do a live podcast at 8:30 on Wednesday night, so check that out. That'll be really fun. We'll kind of react to the schedule with everyone else as it comes out. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's always funny how like, oh, this is the tough part of the schedule, and then you get to that part of the schedule and like, oh, they're 3-10, they're 4-9. You never really know. Although last year kind of went the way we thought with that murderer's row of games turned out to be what ultimately was the Eagles' downfall. So we'll see what the 2024 schedule looks like. We know opening day will be the Packers.
Yeah, sometimes like the strength of schedule thing gets overblown because there's so much parity in the NFL, but you can kind of tell sometimes where the tough stretches are and where it's a little easier for the most part.
Yeah, when you see Niners, Bills, Chiefs, Cowboys in a row in Seattle, that kind of thing, you kind of know it's going to be a tough stretch.
Yeah, and we should also mention that next week OTAs begin. A lot of times you hear that when the spring workouts start that OTAs have begun, and that's not really true. There are phases to the off season, and OTAs are they're still voluntary, but it actually resembles a practice, and that starts next week. The Eagles have several sessions, and then they actually have a mandatory mini camp this year, so a little bit more practice this season.
Yeah, and hopefully we're allowed in the building, and we won't have to watch from the roof of the Wells Fargo Center with binoculars. Oops, did I say that out loud?
We do have a lot to get to today. I posted my first 53-man roster projection, so we're going to go through that, and you have yours ready to go too. So we'll kind of go through the positions in a little bit. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Later in the show, we'll talk about some of the Eagles' opponents in 2024, and we'll talk about some of our favorite and least favorite road cities, road stadiums. Want to mention a few roster moves at the top of the show, though. The Eagles signed 3 more of their draft picks. So Jalix Hunt, Will Shipley, and Anaya Smith now under contract. They'd already signed Johnny Wilson and Trevor Keegan. So 5 down, 4 to go. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and Dylan McMahon still left unsigned.
Yeah, and things have sure changed from back in the day when rookie contracts weren't slotted. So you would get to the start of training camp, and with the Eagles, at least, most of your draft picks weren't signed and started missing time. It was not a great system. There was a lot of, there's no negotiating now. You basically, maybe in structure a little bit and how money is broken up, but there's a specific number. It's got to hit that number, and it makes it a lot easier. You don't have, because it was bad. You're missing all your draft picks. It's really tough. It's tough on the players because they can't be in meetings. They can't even be anywhere near their facility. So things have changed for the better in that regard. And everyone will be signed by the start of training camp. Certainly, you hope by the start of all the practices next week.
Yeah. So and even if they're not, sometimes it lingers a little bit, but these guys all get signed.
Yeah.
The other move the Eagles made, they signed cornerback Sean Stevens, who was a rookie tryout guy at rookie camp. And I don't want to
crazy story.
He does have a crazy story. I don't want to bury the lead, though. The Eagles also released Noah Togoa.
Yeah, it's a sad day for the entire Eagle Eye family, I think, to see Noah Togoa. And but the good news is he'll probably be back. They've already cut him a few times, and he always comes back. So kind of holding my breath and just kind of waiting it out. I think at some point soon we'll see Noah Togoa back where he belongs in the Eagles uniform.
For those of you new to the show, that's Noah Tangiai, tight end, who's been around back and forth off the 90-man roster, the practice squad. He's played in a few games. He's been around for a while now, but
since 2020.
Yeah, so he's gone. You mentioned Sean Stevens has kind of a crazy backstory. Definitely had D1 talent, and a few times it looked like he was going to play Division I football, but he didn't. He ends up playing Division II, West Liberty, Ferris State. And then he goes to the Michigan State Pro Day and kind of wows everyone there, runs a sub 4.4. That'll put some teams on notice. He tried out with the Eagles, and they ended up liking him enough to sign him.
Yeah, the kid had 8 interceptions in each of the last 2 years playing in the Division II level, which is, I don't care what level you're playing, that's great production. And gosh, I mean, he went to 4 different colleges. He played at 2 of them. At one point, he had committed to Purdue. At one point, he committed to Penn State, the NCAA. And he spent time away from football because his mom was sick. The NCAA denied him an extra year of eligibility on the D1 level, which is ridiculous because, I mean, he missed time for a good reason. But it was really a circuitous journey, and good for Michigan for letting him participate in their pro day. And yeah, he wowed a lot of people with his test results. So another cornerback. We got about what is it, 13, 14 corners in camp?
14, yeah.
14. So they're not going to keep them all, but they'll keep several of them. So it'll be, he's 5'9", not a real tall guy, but that ball production, you can't ignore it.
Can't ignore it, and he clearly did enough to. It is always fun. It seems like every year there's a tryout guy who makes the roster and gets a chance to come to OTAs and to training camp, and it's not likely he makes the final roster, especially at a position that is very, very crowded, but maybe he sticks on a practice squad and maybe he hangs around for a while. He's not the youngest guy. I think he's already 25, but
yes,
kind of a cool story and good for him.
And this is the kind of move that if Howie makes 10 of these moves, maybe one of them works out and you got a guy who helps you. And there's, again, like so many of Howie's moves, there's no downside. There's no risk. There's no financial obligation if it doesn't work out. But maybe you get a guy who can help you down the line.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Noah Togoa was going to help you, but
he'll be back.
All right. I have my 53-man roster projection in front of me, and this is going to change, right? We haven't seen these guys on the field at OTAs. We haven't seen them at training camp. There are probably players, or at least a player who isn't even on the roster yet, who is going to be on the 53. So with that said, let's kind of go through position by position. Let's see where we agree and where we disagree. I have a feeling we're going to agree on a quarterback position.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you look at quarterback, and obviously Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett, and Tanner McKee. Those are your 3.
Yeah, is there any chance, and I think I know the answer to that, I mean, Tanner McKee, if he doesn't have a good camp, keep Will Grier instead?
No.
Okay. Just throwing it out there. I think they like Tanner McKee.
They drafted Tanner McKee. They've put time in with Tanner McKee.
He played well last preseason. You think he played well in his second year in the preseason? You
would think. And look, I know that Will Grier knows a little bit of what we think the offense is going to look like, but I think he's kind of here to help bridge the gap a little bit with coaching staff and help them figure out the terminology and get it to the players. Yeah, I think they drafted Tanner McKee. He did nothing last year to make me think he's not worth keeping around. I mean, he was so good that we thought maybe he's ready to be the backup.
Yeah, and the fact that they signed Kenny Pickett, does that mean anything in regard to Tanner McKee and how they view him?
No, I mean, it was a trade for Pickett.
Acquired, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it means a little bit. It means they don't think McKey's ready to be the backup, but I don't think it means they don't believe in him as a developmental guy. This is a team that wants to win now, and Kenny Pickett has some experience under his belt. Not great, he hasn't been good, but he's played a little bit in the league, and they get him for cheap for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. Just throwing it out there.
Do you think there's a chance of that?
Very, very slim.
Percentage?
3.
Okay.
But I also think Will Greer's not going to come here if he doesn't feel like he's not going to come here and not make any money and know he's going to get cut just to help. I think he has to believe that there's at least he has some chance to make the roster.
I don't think teams were knocking down Will Greer's door.
I don't either, but
you get an offer, you take the offer.
I agree. I'm just 3%.
Okay. I'll take the under on that.
Okay.
Running back. I only have them keeping 3. Last year, of course, they kept 4 running backs and then really didn't play Rashad Penny very much. He looked to be their break glass in case of emergency back, and they didn't need to break that glass. They stayed pretty healthy ahead of him. I have 3. How about you?
Yeah, I do as well. 3 running backs. I'm sure they're the same. Saquon, Gainwell, and Shipley.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody else who, if there is a fourth, it's going to be someone who's not here. I mean, I don't think they're going to, keep Tyree on.
Davis Price they brought in. Milton is an undrafted guy who could show you a little something in training camp.
Yeah, and they've kept those guys before. I mean, Josh Adams, that kind of guy, ended up leading the team in rushing and had a nice few years in the NFL. But, my next guy would probably be Davis Price, but I'm keeping 3.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it makes sense to keep 3 because if there's not a clear fourth to keep, that helps. But then also, it's going to be less of a rotation this year. They brought in Saquon. They're paying him all this money. He's making $12 million a year. He's going to play a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason for it. And you can always go out and get a running back. They'll have somebody on the practice squad. There'll be somebody in the building. He'll be ready if you need him. But I'd be surprised if it's more than 3 on the practice squad. I think when you have a Saquon, when you have that kind of, they really haven't had that. Like even Miles and Swift both made Pro Bowls, but they were never that kind of bell cow guy that was going to get 20 carries a game and eat up a ton of carries. So I think it's a different mindset when you look at the room than it has been.
I agree with that. And that's a good point because they've had success with those other guys. But just in terms of workload and ability to do everything, I think Saquon is different than them.
Yeah.
Receiver was tough.
How'd you go?
I kept 6. Start off with the number. How about you?
I kept 5.
5. Okay. And I think that's very possible. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, I think we feel pretty good that we both have them on the roster.
Oh, I forgot A.J.
After that, it does get tricky. For now, I kept the 2 veterans, the 2 additions, Devontae Parker and Paris Campbell, knowing full well that there's a very good chance one of them isn't here, and that's really tough to figure out before they get on the field. And then I also kept Britton Covey and Anais Smith.
Yeah, I went into this under the assumption that they'll only keep one of those 2, and I kept Devontae Parker.
So Paris Campbell not on your roster.
Paris Campbell not on my roster.
But you kept Britton Covey and Anais Smith.
I did.
Yeah, so Britton Covey is a guy that we mentioned a little bit because he did have a good year as a returner last year, but we haven't seen him play very much on offense, and they drafted all these guys who have return capabilities, and it makes you wonder, could his time here be short? I still think they trust him as the punt returner. I still think he's valuable enough in that role to keep him around.
I do as well, but they also really like having players that have multiple abilities. And now maybe Britton Covey can end up being a decent backup slot. I don't know. He seems to catch the ball well when we see him in practice, which is something. We know he's quick with the ball in his hand, so he got some reps on offense very late in the season. might have caught a couple and caught 3 passes or something. But I think somebody's going to have to be really exceptional in that dual role as a receiver and returner to unseat him.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think if there's one guy who could do that, it's Anaya Smith. You know, and look, we both have him on our roster. He was not practicing at rookie camp. He has that stress fracture. So I think that's something worth monitoring. That's nothing to worry about now. But
right.
If we get to OTAs and then eventually really training camp, and if he's limited there at all, then I think you start wondering about his job and his spot on this roster.
Yeah, that's fair.
We both have Johnny Wilson, a 6th-round pick, not making the 53. I can tell you my thinking, but why don't you tell me yours?
Just, I'm not sure you want to keep 2 late-round receivers, and I think with his size, I mean, he's a raw guy. I would definitely want to keep him around the practice squad, but I just think, you know, I just don't know if you want to keep 2 late-round guys like that untested.
Yeah, for me, at least, like Anaya Smith can offer something on special teams. I don't really see that with Johnny Wilson.
Right. Right. But, I mean, he's an intriguing guy with his frame. So keep him around and maybe elevate him here and there. But I have him going.
Yeah. And we should say, like, when you have him going, like, we both think he would be worthy of a practice squad spot, certainly. Sure. And with a 16-man practice squad, like, yeah, of course you're going to keep those guys around if you drafted them. And a lot of times we talk about like sneaking them through waivers. Yeah, it's unlikely most players you cut are going to get claimed. Now, some are, right? Like, absolutely, there are going to be players who get cut, who get claimed. And at some of these positions, I can see players that I have as cuts getting claimed elsewhere. I think you'd probably take that gamble with the Johnny Wilson.
And with most guys, it's hard for teams to settle on their 53-man roster, you know, a week and a half before opening day, and then claim a guy that wasn't in their camp, doesn't know their scheme. You better be really sure he can help you to do that. And yeah, I'll never forget some guy tweeting to me and just blasting me for saying Henry Josie would clear waivers if the Eagles released him. He's like, you're crazy. He averaged 6 yards a carry in preseason. Not only did he clear waivers, he actually never signed anywhere, but it's rare. It does happen, but it's rare. And, you know, if it means that team likes a guy a lot more than you. Now, I mean, it happens in season. I thought it was a little misjudgment like Christian Ellis with the Patriots, but it's rare final cuts. But it does happen.
It does happen. I can think the most one of the recent examples was Casey Tuhill.
Right.
A draft pick. They cut him. They thought they'd get him in the practice squad. He ends up getting claimed by the Commanders. So I get that. And you can even say, like, why would you cut a Johnny Wilson and keep one of these veterans around who might not have the upside? It's because I think those veterans have a better chance to help them this year. And they are kind of in a win now mode. And it's one of the tricky things with roster construction is sometimes you have to balance that a little bit.
Yeah. Now, obviously, a lot of this will be a lot clearer after we get into training camp. I mean, you know, who knows? You know, Paris Campbell could be light years ahead of Devontae Parker from what we observe. But looking at it now, yeah.
All right, let's go to tight end. How many did you keep there?
I kept 3.
I did too. Did we keep the same 3? I kept Dallas Goedert, CJ Uzomah, and Grant Calcaterra.
Yeah, I did. I kept CJ as the 3rd guy, or maybe the 2nd guy. He's got some experience. I got a lot of experience. So yeah, we kept the same 3, surprisingly.
Now, this is one I did kind of struggle with a little bit because Albert Equabenum did not make my roster, but they did keep him for most of last year. Yeah. They clearly like him, and then they re-signed him to make sure he didn't they like him. I just don't. Maybe it comes down to him or Grant Calcaterra for that last spot. I don't think it's wise to keep 4 tight ends. I think it's kind of a waste of a roster spot.
Yeah, that was my approach. And I kept CJ over Alberto just because I guess it came down to the backup tight end we don't know is better than the backup tight end we do know, that kind of thing. I mean, Alberto was just a non-factor when he was here. At least, I mean, CJ's. I mean, he played last year. He caught some balls and he's caught a bunch of passes. I mean, Alberto has caught passes in his career, but I just went with the more experienced, more productive guy.
Yeah, and I think when you look at like play style too, Uzama offers more as a blocker, and
yeah, I guess, yeah,
he definitely does. I mean, Alberto doesn't really offer you much there. Neither does Calcaterra. So
right,
that's been their role, the last few years with Jack Stoll, really like using that second tight end as a 12 personnel guy, as an extra blocker. I'm not saying Uzama's like a great blocker, but he offers more than those other two guys in that area.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I believe he's 31. He's been in the league since 2015. So he's been around. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I have it up on my screen somewhere. I mean, he's caught 192 passes, 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns. So he's never been the guy. He's had a couple 400-yard seasons. I could have easily gone to Alberto, but I went the other direction.
Yeah, and look, there's a chance they get to camp and they go, why are we going to keep this veteran over a guy that we've prioritized keeping around? We think he has some upside. Wouldn't shock me. And now with the practice squad rules where you can keep veterans on the practice squad, like we've seen them use that in recent years. Uzama could be one of those candidates to, if another team doesn't want him, you put him on your practice squad, and maybe earlier in the year you do call him up and you have him elevated on game days.
It's possible. Yeah. We've seen them keep 10-year veterans before on the practice squad. So, yeah. But again, it could be that either Alberto or CJ kind of just doesn't do anything in camp and they move on. We just don't know. But I like my picks. Yeah.
Okay. How about offensive line?
Yeah, this is a tricky one too. How many did you keep?
10.
Okay. I wrote down 10, but I see I only have 9 here. So
we can work that through. Obviously,
numbers. All right. So the 4 starters, and then I picked. I kept Tyler Steen.
Yeah. Even if Tyler Steen's not a starter, he's on the team.
He's on the team.
So we can say the 5 starters, and then who are your other?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then who are your other 4 or 5 after the starters?
Well, I kept Matt Hennessy. I kept Becton. I kept Trevor Keegan, and I kept Darian Kennard.
Oh,
only because they always seem to keep one offensive lineman that surprises you, and a guy that Stoutland likes. Howie's mentioned him once or twice during the offseason. They might like him a little bit. So he's my 9th, and
so that means no Fred Johnson, no Dylan McMahon.
I have Fred. I had Fred Johnson on here. I must have deleted him, but I'm going to keep Fred as my 10th. I have 10.
Okay.
But yeah, I only kept one of the 2 late-round rookies again. Yeah.
And I understand that. So I kept Dylan McMahon just because I think that they'll prioritize keeping an offensive lineman late-round pick than they will a receiver. But I'm not sure about that. It's a tricky one to keep because I don't think he's going to offer you a ton of guard, and you have Matt Hennessy as the backup center. So is it redundant to keep Dylan McMahon? Maybe. So I could see them trying to get him through to the practice squad. I would understand that. Kennard's an interesting name. If you're looking for another guy who like might come out of nowhere to make this team, Gottlieb Ayedze, I think is his name, how you pronounce it, from Maryland. There always seems to be like an undrafted guy who catches Stout's eye, and that's probably going to be him this year. Yeah,
and Kennard's, he's been around. He's with the Chiefs. He's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He's got more Super Bowl rings than career games played. He played in 1 game with the Chiefs, but he's been around, and they seem to like him. Well, it's kind of tough to tell, but yeah, I went Kennard there. Yeah, and Big Fred.
And they, the Eagles after the draft kind of talked about going out and taking other teams' former draft picks, and that kind of supplemented where they would normally do with the undrafted class. They had just had 7 undrafted rookies, so well, I guess 8 now with Sean Stevens, but a very small class, and a reason for that was the guys they brought in after the season, and Kennard is one of them. I think you're right to at least like circle his name. I think he's someone to watch this summer.
Yeah, and along those lines, I did a story. It's really incredible how many draft picks from other teams they accumulated. Now, some of them were guys like Pickett and Saquon, but a lot of them were, and I mean, even CJ technically, but so many of them were kind of guys that were 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks and never got a shot, never played, but there was something about them that the team liked enough to draft them, and Howie just piled up on those guys. So it's an interesting – I did a story on all that. I kind of outlined each one of them and looked at their chances. It's an interesting tactic by Howie. And
do you think it's a good tactic? Do you think it can pay off? I'm not so sure.
I'm not so sure either. I get the thinking that they've talked a lot about competition in training camp and how important that is. So maybe the thinking is that if you have guys who've been in camps, they were drafted, they've been around, may bounced around from one team to another, maybe that'll raise the level of competition in camp. I'm not so sure, but it'll be interesting to see how many of those guys, if any, stick. But certainly Kennard's one of them. He was a 5 in Kansas City a couple of years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, the tricky part of it for me is that, like, obviously the team that drafts you has some, like, they want to keep you. They don't want you to go. So, like, presumably you haven't played very well.
Yeah, and I guess the logic is that sometimes guys just need a change of scenery, a new scheme. You have an offensive lineman like Kennard, and you get him. All right, well, we get him with Stout, then he'll have a better chance than he might with a different coach. So, yeah, I mean, they're all guys that failed pretty much, that failed somewhere else. But maybe that team had a glut at that position. Maybe they tried to get him out of the practice squad. Maybe in some cases they just decided, the player decided, I need a new start somewhere else. I don't know. It's an interesting theory, but, we'll see where it leads.
All right, let's flip the defense. We'll start with defensive tackle. We'll work our way out. How many do you keep there?
I kept 5.
I kept 5 as well. I'm going to guess we have the same 5. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu, Moro Ojimo.
That's who I have.
Yeah, I think the one guy there to keep an eye on is Gabe Hall from Baylor. I think of the undrafted guys, he's the one I kind of have my eye on the most. And PJ Mustipher is another one of those players they brought in after the season that they must like a little bit. They Mustipher like him a little bit.
Oh, I was really hoping you wouldn't go there. Yeah, and he was he's a Penn State kid. I believe he was not a draft pick. I think he was undrafted. But he's a big dude, certainly. Let's see, 6'4", 315. So big, relatively. It's interesting because, I mean, Ojimo, I don't know what they think of him. They seem to like him.
Got a new number.
What's he wearing now?
I believe he's 97 now.
Is that a good number for?
Much better than 72.
Oh, yeah.
Even you agree with that, right?
I don't agree with any of this number crap. It's a number. Doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
I'm sticking to my guns in this one. I don't care. I just don't care. I think the number looks good if the player, like, what's a bad number for a running back?
Something in the 40s.
So Keith Byers wore 41. He caught like 800 passes for the Eagles. So, like, once he becomes a good player, like, wow, 41. I think the player represents the number, not the other way around. The number takes on the personality of the player.
But the number also means you got a little clout now. You can get a better, you know what I mean? Like, Moro Ojimo, rookie 7th round pick. Sorry, buddy, here's 72. The next season, now you've been here a little bit. You got your sea legs under you. Here's 97.
Maybe he liked 72. He didn't want to give it up.
Then he wouldn't have given it up.
Can we just talk about something else? I think they like Moro Ojimo. I guess we'll find out. Gabe Hall's an interesting name. I think we talked about him when they added him, that he was one of the guys who had a legit shot. He was kind of projected as a 5th or 6th round pick.
Yeah, mid-round guy, most people thought.
Yeah, so certainly be in the mix.
And then Thomas Booker, the 4th, he's still around, and I love that he has the 4. That's fun.
Yeah, fun.
You don't have a lot of 4ths. Edge rushers.
Edge rushers.
How many did you keep there?
I kept 5 pure edge rushers.
Okay, I have 6 here, but I understand where this might be a semantics issue. We both kept Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff, Brandon Graham, Nolan Smith. Those 4 are pretty easy. Kept Jalix Hunt just because you can't cut a 3rd round pick.
Right.
I don't expect him to play very much. So there's 5. I also included Zach Bond here.
I didn't put – I have him under edge rusher, but I have him in a separate category called Zach Bond. I don't know what to do with him.
Okay. But you have him on your roster.
I have him on my roster, yes.
Okay.
So I have 5 edge rushers plus him.
There are some tricky cuts at edge rusher. Julian Okwara, to me, is like – I think they're intrigued by Okwara. And Terrell Lewis to a certain degree as well. And then even like Patrick Johnson has played a lot over the last 3 years.
I thought you were going to have Julian Okwara on your 53.
What was that?
I thought you were going to have Julian Okwara.
Oh, did you? I just don't have a spot for him.
Yeah.
It was tricky. Keeping 7 edge rushers is too much. Even if you say Zach Bond's going to play a little off ball, probably not a ton. Patrick Johnson, to me, was one of my tougher cuts in this entire thing, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay looks like it's tough because I'm guessing he's not going to play early, at least early in the season. He might not play all year, but certainly 3. You're not going to. I mean, even if he was a 4th round pick, I think when you start thinking maybe a practice squad of guys in the 5th round, like I think your top 4 rounds, those guys got to make the 53, even if they're not going to play.
Yeah. Do you think he can offer you something on special teams? Maybe not early, but eventually.
Oh no. I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Houston Christian games, to be honest. So I just
think the profile is of a player who can help you on special teams.
Yeah, and I'm sure he played a lot of special teams at Cornell. I mean, he's a safety, so I mean, he's got a. I'm sure he did it at his second school too. So I don't know. I don't know what he is. I don't know what to do with him, but he'll be on the roster. And if I don't know if he can dress him just numbers wise, but if he does, you would expect him to play on teams.
Sure. Linebacker, and we're talking off-ball linebacker. I kept 4. How many did you keep?
I kept 4. Well, yeah.
Okay. Devin White, Nakobe Dean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Who's your 4th?
Well, I put Oren Burks here.
Okay. I have Ben Van Sumeren.
Yeah, I cut Ben Van Sumeren, which killed me to do because he's, great guy. But yeah. They don't even mention him. Like, I think he's got a little something. He added some juice on special teams, but I don't know. I cut him.
I kept him. I could see them going the Nicholas Morrow route with Oren Burks, where they want to keep him around and they play that game early in the year, and maybe he needs to play for them. I always have like recent history that shows maybe they'll do this.
Yeah,
I don't know. Oren Burks is someone who I've seen him play a little bit, and I still feel like I don't know exactly what he's going to be for this team.
Yes, I feel the same way.
So I want to see him at practice. He's a guy that, like, we could get out the training camp and I'd be like, I can't believe I ever had Oren Burks not making this team. He's clearly on the roster. That might happen.
Yeah, that was my approach, was that I could see them cutting Van Sumeren clearer than I could see them cutting Burks.
Okay.
That's why I went that way. And Van Sumer's another one. He could end up on the practice squad. He could end up back on the 53. Somebody gets hurt. It seems like they like him a little bit. It was a little disturbing that Vic Fangio didn't know his name, but he just got here. I mean, he didn't know Jeremiah Trotter's name either. So, and he's making the team. So, Burks and Baum are two guys I just wasn't sure what to do with. I don't know exactly what they are and where they fit in, but I think they're both on the 53.
I feel more obviously I feel more confident about Baum than Burks because that's the way I had it. But I think the reason is because they brought in Baum for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
I think they want that role in this defense. Now, whether or not he can really fulfill that role, we'll see. But I think they had some vision when they brought in Baum, whereas they brought in Burks, I think, because they liked him, but they needed linebackers.
True.
All right, let's go to cornerback, which is not easy because they have so many of these guys. How many did you keep?
I kept all 14 of them, Dave.
You now have a 63-man roster.
I kept 7 to start.
I did too. They kept 7 last year.
They did.
And that was after the injury to Zach McPherson in the preseason. So I went back and looked at the history of this, and for many years in a row, they kept 5, 5, 5, 5. And then 22, they kept 6, and last year they kept 7.
Yeah, they have some young guys that I think they, are going to be stalwarts on special teams. And let's start with this. Did you keep Bradbury?
No.
So we each kept 7, and we didn't keep Bradbury. So I'll start out. I assume we both have Quinyon Mitchell, Slay, Ringo, and DeJean. Who are your other guys?
My others were Isaiah Rodgers, Avonte Maddox, and Eli Ricks.
Kept the same 7.
And this is tricky. And we're going to get to safety in a minute. It kind of works together because they don't have a ton of safeties. Yeah. So I think you do need some players who offer a little bit of flexibility. So that's where I think Cooper DeJean plays a role a little bit. I think that's where Avonte Maddox, if he's able to make the roster, can help you because he offers some versatility to play corner and safety. It was tricky. It was tough to cut Josh Jobe. It was tough to cut Zach McPherson.
Those are the two. I really struggled with cornerback. And I actually at one point I had Maddox cut, or not cut, but I had him on IR. I just said, you know what? He'll start the season on IR because he's just been hurt so much. But I did keep him.
That would have been such a cop-out.
I know. So that's why I didn't do it. McPherson is going to have a chance, certainly. But, yeah, this is the way I went.
And another guy we haven't mentioned a ton is Tyler Hall. Mm-hmm. I think they're intrigued by him as well. And we've heard Howie talk about how they didn't give themselves enough options at nickel corner last year. So even if Avonte makes a team and he's their best bet to start the season, they're going to have better options behind him, whether that's DeJean or Eli Ricks or maybe Zach McPherson now that he's hopefully healthy going into training camp. And then Josh Jobe is a tough cut because he was a great gunner last year.
He was one of the best special teamers.
Yeah, and look, that special teams unit was so good last year that sometimes you do want to throw Michael Clay a bone a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure if Howie says to Michael Clay, who's the one guy, I'm not sure, but I would think Josh Jobe would be, look, just let me have Josh Jobe. So, yeah, corner's tricky. And I think Zach McPherson's a guy that you can get onto the practice squad without a lot of worry. He's not going to get claimed, especially coming off that injury. But, I could see them keeping 3 corners on the practice squad. Just have this whole stable of young guys.
And they've done that a bunch in recent years. They've just had this constant cycle of young corners. And, look, honestly, a lot of them haven't worked out, but no downside in it, really.
Yeah, I could even see Sean Stevens being on the practice squad if he shows ability to be around the ball. I could see them kind of being intrigued by him.
Yeah, and the one guy we haven't mentioned is Mekhi Gardner, who is listed as a cornerback, but it kind of leads us to safety. His best chance to make this team might be as a safety. I would not be shocked if we get the OTAs and he is just a full-time safety.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I put him on with my safeties just because it kind of solves two problems. I mean, they need depth at safety and they have too many corners. So when I looked at my roster, I was like, there's not enough safeties here. And again, I think that's a position where that next safety, that fourth safety could be a guy who, and again, you don't know Sidney Brown. Like, is he going to be ready? Is he going to start on PUP? I don't know. But I did put Mekhi Garner on my 53 as a safety.
Oh, so you have 4 safeties.
And and I put Sidney Brown here in italics, which means, obviously if he's ready, he'll be on the 53. If he's not, I think the next guy is going to be someone who's not here, and he'll start out on PUP. Because I just didn't want to put like Tristan McCollum on my roster just to have him there.
Yeah, so I only kept 3 safeties, knowing that, okay, one of those corners is going to have the ability to help you out in a pinch. I don't like keeping 3 safeties. I think that's too light. But, yeah, I wasn't going to have Tristan McCollum on there. And
so Garner, you have Mekhi Garner as your 3rd safety?
No. My 3 safeties are C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and Sidney Brown.
Oh, so you have Sidney Brown starting the season on the 53?
I do for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Until I see him not practicing, then I'll have to change that maybe. But
obviously, if he's ready, he's going to be on my 53. I think it's more likely than not he starts out on PUP, but we'll see.
Yeah, and an important note about the physically unable to perform list is that in order to be on the reserve PUP, you have to have been on the active PUP, which means you start there when training camp begins. It's not like something they can't bring them to practice,
right?
Let them try it out and then put them on PUP. That's not how that works. You got to start if you're gonna be there to start the regular season. You had to start training camp on that list.
Right. One snap at practice and you're no longer eligible for PUP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was tricky. And then the specialist, we kept 3.
Yeah.
I think you have more than 53 players.
I have like 59.
That's a good way to be right on your 53 man.
I do have 53. It's just the ITAL thing with Sidney. So,
okay.
Yeah. I have 54 with Sidney and ITAL. So yeah. If he's ready, that would be huge. That would be a huge boost for the secondary.
I'd like to sit the Eagles down, and this is the whole organization, and be like, come up with a way to streamline the positional titles, because Cooper DeJean is the only guy listed as a defensive back on the whole roster. They have like outside linebacker has now entered the lexicon, whereas like they have linebacker, defensive end, and now outside linebacker. Like let's figure out a way to do this better.
Yeah. But in this era of positional versatility, that's tricky to do.
I just want to know where to put them in the list. That's all.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. And on the other side, we'll go over Eagles opponents and our favorite road cities in just a minute.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. Okay, Rube, so schedule comes out on Wednesday night. We know one game already. The Eagles open the season in Brazil. They're the home team against the Packers, but we don't know the way the rest of the schedule is going to go.
Yeah, and we'll learn everything, when the bye is, who the home opener is, critically, who they close with. That's always, you say, oh, they close with the Giants. That's a win, or not. So yeah, it's always a fun day. I don't know how it got so big or when it got so big, but it's pretty big.
It's grown with just the popularity of the league. The league is, everyone cares.
Yeah, and it's funny because like then you get the leaks like, oh, I got the Seahawks Week 9 opponent here. Ooh, it's pretty funny, but yeah, it's a fun night.
It is a fun night. Real quick, I'll go through their opponents. Obviously, they play the Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders home and away in the division. Their other home games, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Browns, the Steelers, the Jaguars, and then the Packers are technically a home opponent, even though they play them in Brazil.
And we do have a time for that game now. It's 8:20 Eastern for that opener, that Friday night. Eagles' first Friday night game since 1960, and their first Friday night opener since 1948. They won the NFL championship both those years. That might mean something. You know what I learned today? I learned that the Steelers have not won in Philadelphia since 1965. The Eagles have won 10 straight over the Steelers in Philly. And I learned yesterday that 22 of the last 26 times either the Eagles or Cowboys has won the division, whoever won the second game is the team that won the division. I thought that was interesting. I always say the game number 2 against Dallas is the most important game of the year. That's going to determine a lot. So it comes out that way a lot of the time.
Yeah, I like that nugget. That's a good nugget.
I appreciate that because you don't like most of my nuggets. I'm trying to up my nugget game.
Well, sometimes like this is what it's like to work with Roob is that like sometimes I just get a Slack message that like, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is the first linebacker taken in this round that went here and did this. And I'm like, I don't know how to respond other than like, cool.
Well, I figured I could help. First of all, mine have a little more depth and context than this lame example you just threw out there. But I'll stop trying to help you prepare for your job if you like.
It does not help me. Okay. And it doesn't help me because it's something you're already writing.
I'll stop sending them. I thought you might find them interesting.
Sometimes I do. I feel like you're a little hurt. I'm sorry.
Dave hurt my feelings.
The Eagles' road games, aside from the division, in New Orleans, in Tampa, at Baltimore, Cincinnati, and the Rams.
And those are, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Tampa are cities that the Eagles have had their struggles in. So those will be interesting games. And Cincinnati, too.
I feel like Tampa has become like the second home for the Eagles in recent years.
Yeah, Tampa's beaten the Eagles 4 times in the postseason, which is crazy. Eagles beat them twice, back-to-back, I guess, in 2000 and 2001. But kind of become a rivalry a little bit, and one-sided rivalry. Ended 2 of their last 3 seasons.
Of those road trips, we'll get into the overall. Which of those have your favorite city/stadium?
My favorite city Baltimore's. I love going to Baltimore. It's not a real exotic place because it's so close to here, but I think what they've done downtown is really cool, and it's a fun place to visit and walk around. I love that you can just take the train down and you take the light rail into the city and walk to the stadium. So yeah, and they have a great stadium. So for me, it's up there.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
It was fun getting to go to SoFi. I like that Rams stadium, and I like the LA trip. I think that's always fun. Tampa is easy, and
great airport,
always beautiful. Yeah.
Great airport, and there's always Clearwater Beach and Frenchie's, which is, grouper burgers. So it definitely has its appeal.
Okay. You wanted to talk about kind of our favorite and least favorite stadiums?
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
Yeah. Oh, you kick it off.
All right. So my favorite city to go to is San Francisco. And I always really just anything north of San Francisco. I just love it up there, whether it's Napa, with redwoods, drive up to Healdsburg and walk around Russian River Brewery. I always when I was traveling, I would try to get out there a day early and just spend a day up in Sonoma and Napa area, just driving around up the coast. It's spectacular, and I really recommend if you want to go on an Eagles trip. And the stadium is the complete opposite direction, but it's a great trip.
All right. How about stadium? Which stadium you like the
I'd
most?
say Seattle. I love that place. I don't think it's Quest Stadium anymore. I don't know what they call it.
CenturyLink, I believe.
No, it's not CenturyLink. It's not Quest. It's like Lucor or something. Lupus.
Lumen. It's Lumen Stadium.
Lupus Stadium. Thank you.
Lumen.
Lumen.
Lumen Field, I think.
Lumen Field. But yeah, that's another one. It's downtown or just south of downtown, so you can walk over there. You know what's cool is the baseball stadium is right next to the football stadium, and they're connected by a parking garage. So the same parking garage works for either stadium. So that's really cool. Nice area. Yeah, Pacific Northwest is beautiful. So I'm a big fan of that stadium.
Yeah. Seattle's up there for me in terms of just the stadium. The new stadiums, though, like the ones that I really do like, the stadium in Minnesota, and that's US Bank, not just because the Eagles won Super Bowl there, but I like it probably the most of the newfangled ones, talking about Atlanta, LA, even you can include Dallas in that mix. I think it kind of feels smaller for some reason.
I would never put a dome at the top of my list, but as they go, that Minneapolis stadium's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't mind a dome.
I don't like them.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind them to cover a game. You don't have to worry about the conditions and all that. But just as a sports fan, I just don't like domes.
Okay. I like good football. So sometimes I don't mind the dome. I think Minnesota outside will be a little tough.
Yeah, no doubt. Although I covered a game in that before they opened the what was it, Bloomington? I forget the name. Metropolitan Stadium. I think they played there. But anyway, yeah.
Least favorite stadium?
Ever or current stadiums?
Whatever you want to tell me.
So my least favorite stadium ever is probably the Astrodome, which is still there. It's still standing, as you know. It's right next to Energy or whatever their name of that stadium is anymore.
NRG, yeah.
NRG, where Villanova won its national title over North Carolina.
In the Astrodome, it's like every few years in Houston, they bring up like a new idea of what to do with it, and then it never goes through, and then it just sits there.
You were never inside it, though, were you?
No. I know some people who like took a tour in there, but I believe there's like asbestos, and it's a little, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it made the vet look like, like nice. I mean, it was horrible. I hate that place. And as far as current stadiums, probably East Rutherford, probably MetLife.
Oh, I mean, well, FedEx is way worse.
Yeah, FedEx is worse. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, FedEx is pretty bad.
You hate the Superdome.
Well, it's those elevators. They scare the living bleep out of me. The elevators in the Superdome are like these little phone booth sized coffins that are like, okay, 4 people on here, that's enough. And then they take 3 more people on. You're like,
you're also not a New Orleans guy in general.
I'm not a huge New Orleans fan. Yeah, I've had some good times there, but yeah, not a big fan of like the French Quarter. Just
yeah. I don't know. I do like the fact that you out there on Bourbon going wild that year.
What's that? That's where I met O.J. Simpson at Pat O'Brien's. Mm-hmm. Had a nice chat about Capricorn 1, the movie he made, the only movie I've ever seen, I believe. But there's some nice.
That was what, like 90, 94, 95?
I don't remember. No, it was. Gosh, I think I was covering a Super Bowl down there. I don't know. 92. Is there a Super Bowl there? 92. Whatever year Franco Harris went in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
That was that year.
The timing of all this is very important.
Yeah, it really is irrelevant. Do you have a?
No, I wouldn't say that. My least favorite road city.
Yeah.
I don't like the Washington trip every year, but that's mostly because of the stadium. I make the most of every trip, really. Like I think New England is not always my favorite because they play in the middle of nowhere. So you have to decide if you're going to, if you're flying into Boston, or if you're driving, or if you're flying into Providence.
Take the train to Providence. It's the way to do it. All aboard, Dave.
Take the train to Providence, and how do you get to Foxborough?
I'll mooch a ride with you.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't love that trip when it comes up, and apparently it's going to come up in the preseason this year.
Yeah, tentatively sounds like one joint practice. Gerard Mayo and the Eagles have spoken.
Yeah, that's Mike Reese from ESPN reported that.
Yeah, so we'll see. Eagles and Patriots had joint practices up there. I think it was actually the year Henry Josie was here, which was the summer of 2014, I think.
It was 14. I think they were here in 13. Eagles were there in 14, and then they came back in 21.
Yeah.
With Jalen Mills.
Yeah. But 2014 was up there, and I remember watching Murder Leg. We were all sitting on this hill behind the field, and Murder Leg, you know the story of Murder Leg, the kicker. He basically had people scattering because he's kicking these line drives that were just going right into the hill where people were sitting watching practice, and it was scary because he had no idea where those kicks were going. It was a display like I've never seen, display of kicking like I've never seen in my life. But that it's a nice facility they have up there, and they practice right next to the stadium, so that would be cool. But you know what I do like about Washington, and I'm just backtracking. I love the city and I love the museums. They're all free. There's great museums, great art in the downtown. They don't play downtown anymore. They play in Virginia, but when I used to go down the day before and hit the museums. And then
I did that one year. And you're right. That's fun, but I almost don't even associate.
That's fair. Yeah. You have a least favorite stadium?
If you do that, that's fun.
Yeah, I guess FedEx is your least favorite stadium.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can't get rid of that thing quick enough.
It's hard to believe it's still there. I mean, it's been obsolete for 20 years.
It's just bad. You feel bad for the fans who have to if you're a Commanders fan, you got to go to that stadium all the time.
Yeah,
and raw sewage dumped on you.
Is all sewage raw? Is there sewage that's not raw?
Sure.
The cooked sewage?
Yeah.
But the thing about FedEx is that if you're a Washington fan, Commanders fan, you go there and it's 70% Eagles fans for that week. So that's never fun. At least it's easy to get out of there. 2 hours later, this entrance is closed. This ramp is closed. Got to drive through this strip plaza, go out the back, take an alleyway, and the entrance to the highway is there. But there's a gate over it. Anyway.
All right. We good there?
We're good.
All right. Well, we will have, we want to mention it again, 8:30 p.m. Wednesday. We'll go through the entire schedule, be a live pod, and of course it'll be recorded. So if you don't watch it live, you can listen or watch at your leisure. We want to remind everyone, please rate and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that like button and subscribe there as well. Since new 5-star reviews roll in, been reading those. We appreciate the kind words. Speaking of words, Rube, any final ones?
I have none.
That's the biggest shocker of the day. All right, let's call it a podcast.
I'm not catching strays here.
For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.